Hello again, everybody. And a special hello again to Bailey, and Valerie, and Olive, and Athena, and little Henny. We're going to take a look at machines today. You know, when someone says machines, you think of something with all kinds of gears and motors and things like that. But a machine can be a very, very simple thing. You saw one in an earlier lesson. Do you remember the seesaw? That is a special kind of simple machine called a lever, or some people say lever. And if you remember, we put a heavy person on that end of the seesaw and a lighter weight person on this end of the seesaw. And if we got the distance just right, they balance each other out like that. So what does that have to do with a machine? Now, instead of a lever, something that you want to push here or lift up, but it's too heavy for you. But you can use a lot less force at a greater distance from the middle of the lever, and now you can lift a heavy object with a lot less effort. That's an example of a lever. Another example of using a lever is to put one end where it doesn't move, and then put what you want to pick up in the middle. And when you lift up on this end, I can't prove it to you because I can't measure the weight, but that is a lot less effort than that weight over there. So that's another example of using a lever to move things. Levers don't all have to be big. They can be smaller ones like this, but they both accomplish the same thing. Overcoming a greater weight with a lesser weight. And in some cases, just changing the direction of the force. Picking something up here by pushing down here. That's a lever. Now, levers can have all kinds of uses, and they don't always look like levers. For example, if I take these scissors apart, this can be a lever, and this can be a lever, and if I put them together, I can use them to cut things. It's a scissor. So that's an example of two levers hinged together. Here's a pair of pliers. Same thing. A little bit of force here makes for a lot of force up here. So those are all examples of levers. There are other kinds of machines too. One is called a wheel and axle. It doesn't always look like a wheel and axle, but that's what it is. You ever seen Mom or Dad driving a car? Do you know how they steer it? They hold the steering wheel here, but what they're turning is that little shaft in the middle. So a little bit of force here produces a whole lot of force here. Here's an example of that. Now this doesn't look like a wheel or an axle, but I can make it go in a circle. So, just for example, suppose I'm not strong enough to turn this nut on the bolt. Well, what I can do is put it here, okay, and now, if I put the force out here, you see how far my hand is from where the bolt is? That means that this little bit of force here can overcome a whole lot of force over here. That's just another example of a wheel and axle. Kind of reminds you of a lever, doesn't it? Well, sure, because a wheel and axle is nothing but a lever that goes in a circle. Nothing mysterious about that. Pulleys are harder to demonstrate. Now, what you do with a pulley, I'm going to try to hold this in the middle and run a line, in this case it's a piece of thread, over here. And if I pull down here, as I said, this one's difficult to demonstrate because I don't have any way of holding the pulley. But if I pull down here, now the pulley will turn, and I can't do that because I don't have the equipment, it'll pick up here. The same amount of force on both sides, but it does change the direction of the force, so you can pull something up by pulling down. And I guess that's why they call it a pulley. Pulleys can also be used to pick up more force with less effort, but again, I don't have the materials to demonstrate that. But a pulley is really another example of a lever, even though it doesn't look like one. Now we come to wedges. A wedge, well, I'll tell you what, before we get to the wedge, let's get to the inclined plane. All an inclined plane is a ramp or a flight of stairs.
Come on.
Now that was the pendulum. You remember that lesson? But that noise was made by little levers hitting little pipes to make them produce sound. But back to this lesson, okay? So for an inclined plane, instead of picking this thing straight up, it goes up the inclined plane. Now think, what's easier, going upstairs or climbing a ladder? The ladder, you climb straight up, but the stairs are an inclined plane. You have to move a bigger distance to get where you're going, but you don't have to push as hard. So that's an inclined plane. Now, a special kind of inclined plane pushes in both directions at the same time. That's called a wedge. A knife is an example of a wedge. Now here, if I push down, and it helps if I move it back and forth, with a little bit of force here, a whole lot of force pushes those parts of the apple apart. I want to make sure I don't cut my fingers here. It's not part of the lesson. But let's try this again. Okay. The force that I push on is down, and the force that the wedge, the knife, produces is off to the side. There's no way that you could just take the apple and go like this. But if you use a wedge like this, it makes it easier. Here's another example of a wedge. Now this thing's dirty, so I'm not going to push it into the apple. Oh, wait a minute, this apple's for the deer. Sure. So this can also be used, see, to overcome a greater amount of force. And, ready for this, it also can be used as a lever. Okay. Now, one more simple machine. Let me see, we've done the lever, the wheel and axle, the pulley, the wedge, and the inclined plane, right? Now, if you take that same inclined plane and wrap it around in a circle, you get a screw. Remember I was putting this nut on the bolt before? This is an example of a screw. You see those little ridges there? They go around in a spiral. So, if I use my wheel and axle to help me hold the screw, now, instead of pulling straight out, see what I do? I turn like that. Look how easy it is. Okay. To take this object off the bolt. Okay. That's an example of a screw. This part of the bolt, it has these little threads on them. That's an example of a screw. Have you ever ridden with Mom and Dad into a parking garage? To go from one level to the other, do you drive straight up the side of the... No. You either drive up a straight ramp like this, which is an inclined plane, or you go around to the first floor and around to the second floor and around to the third floor. That's a screw. And what it does, you have to go further, but you don't have to push as hard. And really, that's what machines are all about. Making work easier to do by trading space for force. You have to exert a greater force. You have to exert a lesser force over a greater distance to do the same amount of work. And that's what machines do. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm sure I'll be back again because there are plenty of other things that we can demonstrate that make science fun. Bye-bye.